I like that it's 100 and not 100, right? It's not really a number. It's kind of just like, oh, there's 100 of them. Which again, maybe that's kind of leaning into my South Jersey uh, dialect, right? Oh, there's 100 people, right? It felt right to me, and also I think it kind of sets up the reader for their sense of what the book is going to be. That this is going to explore um, it's going to explore promiscuity. It's going to explore
Mhm.
monogamy. It's going to explore a kind of series of love affairs and facets of love affairs, and you kind of get that right from the title.
Okay, before you hear my interview with Richie Hofmann, which you all just heard a teaser clip, it is good. And it is all things queer poetry and my love and deep admiration for Richie's 100 Lovers. I just want to first thank the fall intern team. So, Andrea, Chris, Rosie, and Taj. It means so much to have them from Stony Brook University serving as our Ivory Tower Boiler Room interns. So, congratulations are in order for them. Their creativity has been so beautiful to witness, and make sure you see everything they're doing on social media. They are the ones who are really sharing the video teasers on our Instagram. And if you're not following us, and on our TikTok, so at Ivory Tower Boiler Room, follow us on Instagram and TikTok. Also, we have a Twitter and we have a Facebook. I also want to let you all know that we have a Patreon. It's called the Ivory Tower Boiler Room Cafe, because you are getting all of our unedited videos. So you actually get to see what it looks like when I'm having an interview experience. So go to go to patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room, and you can join at $5 a month, which, because you are in the cafe, is less than a nice coffee in a lot of cafes, especially where I am on Long Island. But I love my coffee shop, so, but hey, get your coffee at one of your local coffee shops and become a Patreon subscriber. Again, patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room. We have a really exciting event in collaboration with Pen and Brush, which is located in Chelsea in Manhattan. We are having a Halloween literature bash. It's on October 29th from 7 to 10 p.m. So you will see in the show notes the RSVP link. You get food, you get cocktails. There's going to be Ivory Tower Boiler Room merchandise giveaways, hats, tote bags, posters, our coffee mugs. Also, we're going to have book giveaways, which were given so graciously from Ivory Tower Boiler Room guests of ours, including Gregory Maguire, Laura Elena Donnelly, Lev Rosen, Zach Topping. I don't want to forget any of their names. Henry Fry. Um, okay, Antoine Wilson. Okay, I think I did it all. And if I forgot your name, I'm so sorry. Um,
And all of this for only $20.
and it is in Manhattan. Please come dressed as your favorite literature character. I am going to have an ancient Greek inspired costume. That's all I'm telling you. I know Mary's working hard with her type of witchy vibe costume. Also, Mary, who is our chief contributor, Kim, our editor, is going to be there. I can't wait. It's going to be so fun. So please join us in Manhattan for our Halloween literature bash. It's a Saturday. It's October 29th. It's 2 days before Halloween. How much more Halloween can you get, really? Everyone wants to party on the weekend. It's on a Monday, Halloween. So come Saturday and celebrate Halloween with us. Okay. without further ado, here is my interview with Richie Hofmann. Hi, welcome back to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. So I was joking with this guest that this has felt like months in preparation because I first met him in February. And now we're recording end of August, but all of you are listening now in the fall. So, hopefully it's nice and beautiful where you are. First, I'm joined with Richie Hofmann, who happens to actually be the first ever poet interview. Well, we've had a National Poetry Month episode, but to discuss poetry and their work, you get to grace us here in the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. But let me
Oh
introduce.
gosh, I'm so honored.
Well,
I'm never the first at anything.
well, you are the first here. But just to introduce you all to Richie, Richie is the author of 100 Lovers, which we're going to discuss in full today. But he's also the author of Second Empire, and his poetry has appeared recently in The New Yorker, the New York Review of Books, and the Yale Review. He teaches at Stanford University and lives in Chicago and San Francisco. And I might have heard he's in the Bay Area, so you're making me miss San Francisco.
It's a really beautiful place, and it's a particularly gorgeous place to make poems in. There's a kind of mildness, a breeze, the fog. It's a very poetic climate here.
Yeah, well, and also I know he'll shout out his social media later, but you have to follow Richie on Twitter and Instagram because I just love everything he does in the social media sphere.
Oh, thank you, Andrew.
Your own type of poetic autofiction happening in social media. And we'll dig in because I just told Richie I used his poem called The Fables from 2019, right? Was that when it was first published?
That sounds right, yeah.
In my queer poetry course to introduce them to that concept of autofiction. And, you just mentioned San Francisco as a place to write. And let's start there. Like, what does setting really do for you as a poet? Like, do you really feel the difference when you move around?
I think the process of making poems for me often feels like a process of raising my level of attention to details in the world around me. And so place is an important part of that, not just cities or states or climates, but also the rooms that you're in. I often feel that when you're in the zone of making poems, when you're writing all of the time, when you're living inside of that energy, you really feel like you're inside a poem as well. Everything feels like an image. Everything feels like a figure. There's a way that the whole environment kind of becomes poetic. So it's interesting. The environment is certainly pressing in on the poems, certainly, but then also the process of making poems also changes the environment. It sometimes feels like it's rendering everything in a kind of poetic space.
Yeah. So do you feel that San Francisco compared to Chicago, compared to New Jersey, compared to New York City, they all have different, compared to France, which you
Yeah,
take us
I think
into. Yeah.
they all have very different energies, I'm sure. I typically write when I'm traveling. I think I feel particularly heightened. It can be hard to write at home sometimes, not just because you're used to the environment, and so sometimes your observational faculties are maybe a little bit off, but also you're kind of subject to your routines there. I don't lead a very exciting daily life. I like to go to bed early. I like to spend time relaxing. I'm not kind of a crazy person in that way. But when I travel, I feel like I have access to more observation, to more a stronger sense of feeling.
Yeah. So you're not going to the Castro and Moby Dick the bar and hanging
No,
out
I
there till 3
hardly
a.m.
no, I hardly ever go out or do anything. I don't like nightlife. I find it abusively loud.
Mm.
Um, I'm kind of quiet that way.
Yeah. Have you ever gone to like the gay resort scene of Fire Island or and
Mostly
yeah.
Provincetown, mostly
Oh, okay.
Provincetown.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
but again, I'm typically in bed by 9 p.m.
Yeah. Yeah. So even on vacation, you're pretty
I'm pretty staid. I'm pretty
Yeah.
staid.
I was gonna
The
say
poems are
straight
a space
laced,
where you
but
get to be. Yeah, I'm a little straight laced. That's right. That's right. Sarah Brown. Um, but the poems are a place where anything can happen, and I feel attuned to the world in particular ways.
yeah. Well, and I think something that I've just been so curious to ask you, and this is any writer, but I think especially poetry because of its fragmentary way at getting at psychology, the analysis of the speaker you have to create. That when you're growing up, I feel that in childhood, a lot of poets really come to understand that blend between reality and fiction in a different way, say, than other genres. So, do you remember your journey like through childhood? Was this something you were you thinking musically, thinking in this self-aware way through words?
Music and theater were the most important things to me. Not literature. In addition to not liking nightlife, I'm surprisingly not totally bookish. I didn't feel like I was a bookworm child like some of my writer friends who read thousands of pages under the covers with their nightlight. I loved theater. I loved performing, and I loved singing. Most of all, singing in choirs. I feel like my first interest in poetry was piqued through singing and through theater.
Do you still continue your theater background or has that
I mean, as an audience member, as a kind of fan of things, I mean, I follow that kind of thing, but I don't perform in theater. I'd like to join a choir again. I love singing, but as you know from my bio, I live in multiple places and I'm very unreliable because of that. So I haven't yet found an ensemble, but I hope when I settle in one place, I can maybe join a symphonic chorus or something. I love that repertoire. I love the way that music can create even more meaning than the poem itself that's being set. I love the feeling of attention and focus that comes with choral singing in particular. I love that feeling of just total concentration. I feel it when I'm singing. I feel it when I'm cooking. I feel it during sex. I feel it during writing. Though that kind of focus feels really good. I'm anxious and freaked out about the future or worried about the past or there's a million things to do, but when you're kind of inside the art, inside the artistry as a writer or as a performer, it's a kind of intoxicating focus. I love just being in the present moment totally.
Yeah, and that makes sense with theater and poetry. They're both such arts that you have to practice presentist, almost a mindfulness method for yeah.
That's right. Yeah, I don't have a sophisticated meditative practice, but I know I've heard people speak about mindfulness, and I certainly think there's something akin to that kind of heightened attention that comes with living inside a poem for as much of your life as you can.
Yeah. Well, and just not just because you are from New Jersey, well, even though that does indebt me to
Well,
you in a certain
Andrew,
way.
I mean, we both have such strong South Jersey accents. I knew it instantly that you must be from where I'm from.
Yes,
I could just
yes.
tell. You gave yourself away. I mean, you can't hide the New Jerseyness. It cannot be hidden.
Mhm. Well, and I wonder, do you feel that growing up, you know, in South Jersey, did it give you any type of shape of your poetics or even your crafts? Like, did it manifest in any way?
I'm certain it did. As voice, I mean, we have this idea of a poetic voice or a writerly voice. Critics have these too, as much as poets and novelists. Your voice is a mixture of all of the musics and textures of the language that you encounter. Most of my waking life, I spend teaching poetry and mentoring young writers, and I'm always trying to push them to find their voice. And I think the best thing they can do is lean into their vocal textures, the languages they grew up speaking, things like accent, things like the texture of their language. I'm always striving in my own work to write something that feels truer to myself, that feels more me, that sounds like me, that lets in different kinds of language that I would use and encounter, that's really sad, but also really funny, that's really kind of literary and obsessed with high art as I am, but that also has room for the vernacular. Like I love that kind of admixture of textures. And I'm always encouraging my students to find that. So I'm sure the music of the South Jersey dialect certainly informs my work just as much as the events of my life that I encountered there must inform them. But I think we're always looking for that music. Everyone's speaking voice is somewhat unique.
Yeah.
And how do you tap into it? I mean, that's something I strive for all of the time. And I feel like I'm getting closer, book after book after book. I'm deep in a new project already, and I want that to have even greater variety of texture than I was able to make happen in the first two books, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And not to just get sensual right away, but I mean, to have a title like 100 Lovers, um, is playful, is also priming your reader to really try to count, figure out whether this is actually speaking about 100 lovers like a black book list that you have, or if this is more like, who are these lovers? Are they are they real? Are they specters? Are they elements of your personality, the speaker's personality? All of these questions.
Yeah, that's no, it's an eloquent question. I think it's all true. I mean, I think it's clear from the book that there's, multiple lovers the speaker has, but I think you're right too. He's a different lover with all of these people, and I think I was really trying to the best of my poetic ability, show a sense of a life in the richest possible way. Show a speaker who was beautiful but also could be ugly, who could be madly in love but who could also be cruel, who could be a kind of critique of the patriarchy and of homophobia, but also internalize that as well. Like I wanted it to be a kind of rich and true sense of a person with lovers. I'm proud of the title. It wasn't titled that originally. The whole collection had been named after one of the poems, which is "You Couldn't Lose Me."
Hmm.
I liked that, and I submitted it to my editor with that title. But she and some of the other people on staff felt like it just didn't really capture the essence of the book, and she suggested the title "100 Lovers," which appears in the poem Pernod, and kind of like one of the thesis statement kind of moments of the book. And I instantly loved it. We discussed a lot of different title options, but that one just felt right to me. I liked that it's 100 and not 100, right? It's not really a number. It's kind of just like, oh, there's 100 of them. Which again, maybe that's kind of leaning into my South Jersey dialect, right? Oh, there's 100 people, right? It felt right to me, and also I think it kind of sets up the reader for their sense of what the book is going to be. That this is going to explore. It's going to explore promiscuity. It's going to explore monogamy. It's going to explore a kind of series of love affairs and facets of love affairs, and you kind of get that right from the title. So I thought it was a quite brilliant suggestion, and I was very pleased to take it. I think it ultimately does a lot more work than my original title had.
Yeah. Well, and it also, I just love the nuances of how affect the just these layers of shame, acceptance, belonging, like everything is kind of all
Yeah,
tied
pleasure
together.
and cruelty and yeah, being lonely, being sick of your lover, being married, being cheating, being single, like all of the kinds of facets of love and sex that I wanted to give voice to.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you pose these questions. Just because like in my own life, not to make this my, therapy session, but I think poetry, what I love is always invites the reader to question, right? That's the point, is to really reflect on our own um psyche. And I've even been thinking, will I be open to an open marriage in a relationship? Should I seek polyamory? Like, is monogamy for me? Then I learned about, you know, like all these. I just heard a term on Fire Island called, I think it was um like a thruple monogamy with a thruple, or I don't know. There's all these new phrases I'm starting
Well,
to learn.
I love all this nomenclature. For one, it has such interesting verbal texture. A poet can't resist, these kinds of words. I remember the word monogamish, which I really liked, and I have yet to use in a poem, but I'm working on it. But I also wanted to create something that felt more complex than all of these, than the nomenclature would imply. That in essence, desire can't be labeled. No amount of rules can be followed, that there isn't really a way of possibly living fully inside a politics or an ethics without a lot of creativity toward those rules. I wanted it to be complex and feel realer and not so kind of clean and delineated.
Yeah, yeah. And if you'll do the pleasure, will you read the poem where your title comes from?
Oh, sure.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, Richie
It'd
has
be
been
my
so
pleasure.
kind to do this, which
Oh, it's a pleasure to talk about it. I feel like we're old friends, like we've known each other forever. And who knows, we might have cohabitated in some moment in time in New Jersey of the
we
past.
we might have. I mean, I don't think we're far in age. I don't like to ask a young gay man his age, but
I know, especially on the air. Um, it said this meeting is being recorded. So I'll read this poem. It's called Pernod. It's one of the last poems, I think, one of the last poems I put in the book. It comes toward the end. Um, Pernod is a kind of liqueur, kind of like French afternoon liqueur. Pernod. In the summer, I slept without a shirt. I dreamed light BDSM dreams. I walked through forests of tall black trees and maidenhair ferns. I guzzled Pernod. I took pictures of the carvings above the black columns of the local chapel. A man carrying a sheep, a miser being chastised. To give oneself to 100 lovers, hard. To give oneself to one, also hard. I watched an older man and a younger man tanning themselves by the freezing pool. I stayed up all night. I cleaned my genitals in the sink.
okay, hold on to that question because we'll be right back. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Your brain needs support, and new Ollie Brainy Chews are a delightful way to take care of your cognitive health. Made with scientifically backed ingredients like Thai ginger, L-theanine, and caffeine, Brainy Chews support healthy brain function and help you find your focus, stay chill, or get energized. Be kind to your mind and get these nootropic chews at olly.com. That's OLLY.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
The Ivory Tower Boiler Room is so happy to welcome Broadview Press as our official sponsor. Broadview Press is an independent academic publisher in the humanities that produces high-quality, pedagogically useful books for use in university and college classrooms. They publish in the humanities, mainly in English studies, writing, philosophy, and history. They always publish with an eye towards diversity, so there is a strong list of titles from women, people of color, and other authors from marginalized groups. In the summer of 2022, they launched their new Broadview Anthology of American Literature, which increases diversity in the classroom because it rethinks the American canon and breathes new life into the American Literary Survey. It's actually been called, quote, the new gold standard in the field. I love using Broadview Press text in my own classroom at Stony Brook University. I can't wait to use the new Anthology of American Literature when I have the opportunity. And for all of you out there, Broadview Press has given us the official code Ivory Tower for 20% off site-wide on broadviewpress.com. Again, that is code Ivory Tower for 20% off. Thank you. Just the evocative, you reading it, Richie, like you have such a beautiful voice of just
Thank you,
articulating
Andrew.
the desire, the, and Richie, I have to say, I've listened now twice fully to his Audible audiobook performance, and it's so beautiful that you read.
Oh, thank you.
Your
I know I was really grateful to have the opportunity to do it. It's a weird experience. I mean, you're probably used to this as a podcaster, but it's a very hard thing to be in the recording studio and to hear everything that's happening, all of your stomach grumbling and all of the weird clicks in your mouth and throat, and to kind of have to read the poems over and over again and confront what you wrote in that different kind of medium. This poem was one of the later ones. It has a kind of style I was going for in this book, with these kind of short declarative sentences that kind of move rapidly, that kind of juxtapose different images and tones. I thought the phrase light BDSM was kind of funny. It's like the speaker is, he's like intrigued by S&M, but it's like gotta be light because he's such a control freak. You've got this church architecture in it. You've got this kind of alcohol, which is both crude and a little foreign. This kind of sad ritual of cleaning the genitals.
Can you explain that? I'm still picturing that visualization. It's so visceral.
Well, I thought of it as masturbatory. I thought of it as lonely. I thought of it as maybe weirdly ritualistic, maybe related to the BDSM, maybe to the chastisement of the miser depicted on the church. Is it a kind of self-chastisement? Is it a mundane act? I don't know. I wanted the poem to kind of shift through those ambiguities of tone.
Yeah, and it's in the sink, right? Sorry, Rich. It's in the sink.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's like it's not even
right.
a full bathing, like granting yourself the access to a shower or a bath.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I don't know. Because just like I know, some men do this after a quick hookup. So, yeah, but that ritualistic element, I mean, and I really love how you introduce your title in the poem, because like hearing you read it, I love to just hear that comes with the 100 lovers, but then at the same time, how about if it's one lover? Like you're still going to have a dilemma. And
also hard, right? And hard is both arousing and difficult at the same time, and I think that the tone is somewhat ungraspable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even to me, I mean, you want to have a sense of what you're doing as a poet, but I think the most intriguing poems to me are the ones that, I don't know, that you're not totally sure of, that feel a little bit risky, that feel like you don't exactly know the answer to it yourself, that has that surprise for you even as you write it.
Yeah.
This is
And
one of those that just kind of unfolds that way.
yeah. And wait, I was so happy that I listened to you read them on your audiobook, because the French words, I was just happy that I was not trying to pronounce them myself. But so
Yeah, you really, I'll
Pernod?
just say
Yeah.
you come to, yeah, that's right. You come to regret it when you're doing the audiobook. I'm like, oh shit, why did I put all of this in here? Um, but what can
But
you do?
yeah, but even I like, as a poetic process, I always want to know, like, do you actually outline or no? Do you let does it depend on the poem, the theme, or whatever you're
Yeah,
capturing?
it really depends, Andrew. It's just I wish it were always the same,
Hmm.
because it would make the process so much more workable, but you really don't always know. I think I'm a more controlling writer than some people. I mean, you can tell from the shape of the poems. Like, I like things that are small and neat and that have a kind of composure. So there are little tricks that I do to try to control and organize. A lot of the poems are sonnet length poems
Hmm.
at 14 lines. I love the history of the sonnet. Sonnets are all about, the argument of love. And so I wanted that to be a part of this book. But also, from a compositional process, I love knowing where a poem's going to end, and that I have a certain number of lines left and I need to swerve in a certain moment, and that I've got very limited space to make something happen. That's very freeing for me as a writer. A lot of the poems in this book have that organizing principle. The poem Feast Days has rhyming couplets, which is another way for me to kind of discipline the shape of the poems as I'm working on them. But it's never quite the same. I don't know if I outline. Sometimes kind of where you want to go, but that's rarely a good thing for me as a poet. Usually, if I know where I want the poem to end, it's going to feel forced or feel unnatural, or it's oftentimes it doesn't work out the way you want it to. But
Hmm.
this from being a scholar, like, you need the fiction of a structure to do anything. I'm like, okay, this is going to be 10 lines, 10 sections. But it rarely works out.
Mm-mm.
Just like a dissertation, like, you have this plan for how it's all going to go. But I mean, how many dissertations go the way you expected? And poems are the
Yeah.
same way.
Yeah. Well, I just finished a Whitman and Queer Theory article, and it was that same process. I mean, my method, though, I have a little method, and I think for scholarship, similar to when I have interviews with prose writers, is there's like the I think they call it those who do like plot points, or the pantser. I don't know. There's all these terms, but I have a little blueprint. But usually, what I do is wherever I'm writing, I have like a little note of what I want to do next. But it usually gets pushed down, or I move it up. But you're right. You have to be in it. Like, not until you're really in it do you see, oh, okay, this is where this is
That's
swerving.
right.
Hmm.
Because you don't know until you write it. You really, like, you could do all of the, I mean, unless you're Mozart, who could just like write the entire symphony in his head and then write it down perfectly with no changes. Like, I think most of us use the process of making to teach ourselves something, to kind of to make something happen. In Pernod, like, I knew I wanted those short, mostly end stopped kind of lines. I knew that juxtaposition would lead to a kind of emotional terrain to tap into. I wanted that to give oneself to 100 lovers, hard, to give oneself to one, also hard. I stole that structure from a Chinese poem in translation that I don't remember, but it has that kind of uh, tone and structure of a Chinese poem. I wanted that to go in this poem of France. I wanted there to be different kinds of juxtapositions, and I don't think I could have known exactly when I set out what that would produce on the page. You just kind of have to try it and then cut something out and move it around. That's the fun part of making poems.
Yeah.
As it is, I think, the fun part of making papers and articles as well. It's just what you teach yourself and how you sophisticate and discipline your argument through the process of doing it and end up somewhere you never could have expected.
Yeah. And I could see this being a novel. Like, not that you have to be your novelist of 100 lovers, but I could see like all, because you offer, that's what I love, these queer impressions. There's the puppy mask with this BDSM moment. There's, the French journey with the lovers. There's, feeling that you've offended your white collar father because he's from New Jersey and he would not want to hear the word fuck. Like all these interlinked moments that really could be, I guess, drawn out. And there's also this moment where you're reading a queer novel, I think. Well, I say you. Again, I always say to my students, it's not the poet, it's the speaker. But this is the
No, I get it.
messiness, right? This is that tantalizing, I call it the autobiographical speaker, which is when it becomes so linked to the poet, that confessional voice in a way, which is why I love.
Well, and I think
Yeah.
that's what you want the reader to feel. I mean, it doesn't matter like if the poet did these things in real, quote unquote, in real life, but like it has to have that sensation. It has to have that kind of, I don't know, verisimilitude or that kind of authentic feeling. Yeah, I mean, it's something I was going for. You say novel. I mean, I wish it should have been called a novel. I would have sold so many more copies, Andrew. And then I could have just kept it the same. People are like, what is this really weirdly short book? But I was also thinking of the diary form. When I started writing these poems, I was discovering the work of Hervé Guibert, French writer from the 80s, who died in 91, and whose work was new to me and is really being translated into English all of the time. There's a new novel coming out, and he's really, I mean, he's been dead, but it's new in English in the fall, and he's someone whose work totally opened up my mind. It's often called autofiction. This is a kind of buzzword in contemporary literature. People fight about what it is and if it has value or not, but the real takeaway for me from his work was this kind of diary form. Like, they were so intense, they felt so private. You really got the sense of a whole personality. And I love poems that do that too. Two of my favorites are James Merrill and Frank O'Hara, and both of those poets, you feel like you know some full version of a person from reading their work. It's not just like, oh, their images are really cool or their metaphors are really zany. You have the sense of a personality breathing behind those poems, and I don't know how they achieve that, but it's something I want to achieve. I want it to feel like someone is kind of invited into a kind of interiority that is really open, but also vulnerable, but also a little bit guarded. I want it to feel like they're interfacing, to use a kind of tech word, they're interfacing with a breathing, living person. And it has all the hotness and urgency of a real life being kind of lived as you're tearing through these pages.
Yeah. Well, and I feel bad. I can't remember the poet's name. Is it Catherine Who wrote Daddy Issues? Do you remember? I don't know. I'll have to look it up.
Mm,
But
yeah, let me know.
I don't know. I'll find it. But uh I feel that this is definitely going to be Andrew the scholarly mind asking the poet to try to, come away from your work. But I guess just because, I'm always seeing things in connection in the contemporary moment and who I interview. And I see us like we're all kind of tapping into some energy right now, which is like stepping away from categorization. I see this with your
Mm,
poetry, Ocean Vuong, Jericho Brown, Harmony Holiday. Like you're
yeah.
all kind of part of this project of just making things messy, right? Even if it's a queer aesthetic, like what is the messiness of it? And, you know, what is consensual? What's not consensual? These are not binaries. Like they're not easy to solve. And I feel like your poetry just does such an amazing job of showing the messiness. And I mean, I especially love the Toilet of Venus. I don't know why, but I do
Oh,
know
I'm
why.
happy you like that.
No,
I'm
I
happy you.
I do. I think it's definitely probably, well, I think it's the last verse. That's what there's this
Yeah.
playfulness in the
Do you want me to
poem.
read this one?
Oh, can you? Oh, that would be wonderful. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And then we could talk about it because it's funny. I don't usually read this one. I mean,
Yeah.
I've done so many readings, but I don't really read and talk about it much. So I'm excited
Yeah,
that you
yeah,
like it. The Toilet of Venus. The pages still uncut. A book from the 40s about Watteau. He gave it to me in the garden, pulling it out of his tote bag. We didn't kiss. The bugs were biting us. All I wanted was to look at the paintings. Everyone swirling, a little ridiculous in their extravagance. So many couples, or soon to be couples. I don't know how to explain my love of pleasure without sounding like a creep. When he saw me naked, he said, "You look like a grown up Cupid."
I mean, just that ambiguity. I think what I like about it is um well, the way that this couple, the questions the speaker's going through, but also not knowing whether the speaker's exactly fond of the compliment or feels a little aggrieved, like that he's seen child in this childish light, like not being taken seriously.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's right. I think it's kind of both. I think I meant it to be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the speaker of the poem has this kind of cherubic body, this kind of soft cherubic. I mean, I mean, this whole poem kind of takes its title and idea from the paintings of Watteau, from these Rococo, kind of extravagant pastel colored paintings that are full of those putti, those little fat naked baby angels that are kind of, always circling vaporously around paintings from Baroque and after, or Renaissance Baroque and after. And the speaker kind of has one of these body types, but it is a god. I mean, it's a god of love. Cupid is one of my personal symbols, I think, in some ways, and he's wreaks havoc and he's a little chaotic, just like the speaker of this, always falling in love and making other people fall in love with him and with each other. But you're right, it's also kind of insulting to like be seen as, I don't know, as like a man baby in some ways, or I don't know, to be a little chubby or soft limbed or whatever. um Kind of not a sexualized image,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but also highly sexualized at the same time because it is the god of love. um and 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 you're right, I think it is kind of someone the other day was writing about this poem, and and called it the splendor of the speaker's body. And I remember reading that and thinking, oh my God, that is so not how I read it. I wasn't thinking of a splendorous body. I was thinking of a kind of a kind of grown-up baby body, which I have, and the speaker has. And you're right, it's kind of ambiguous.
But what do you mean you have a grown-up baby's body, Richie?
No, it's just, it's just a descriptor. It's just a descriptor.
I was to say, first
of
of all, like, and I mean this, without, there's no motive behind it, but you are aesthetically just a very beautiful person, Richie. Like, well, I hope you take
Andrew.
that compliment.
Thank you.
Not to make Richie
oh my God,
blush.
keep going. But it's a strange thing to say to someone, especially because they're kind of naked for the first time, I imagine. It's kind of like, you look like a grown-up Cupid.
Well, yeah, and I think that's where my mind is heading, is more like when I say, like, I see what you mean by vulnerable, but I think I find this in so much of your poetry is, like, you called it the double meaning. I think it's also like going against expectation, right? Like, if there's, especially in queer male culture, if there's a certain aesthetic you fit, like you fit a certain category that, and you're going against the odds, like, you're not the partier, like you've kind of opened up, you're not the nightlife person, you're a poet, like you're looking at all of the nuances of language. It does go against stereotype, and I love that you find this in, especially the Toilet of Venus. And
yeah, I think that's right. Well, and I loved that title. I thought it was kind of, it's a title that's both really conservative and 18th century. Like, that is what these paintings are called, right? It's kind of like the toilette. It's like an old word for like what we might call like a vanity table or something, where I guess the goddess does her makeup and waits, in the boudoir or whatever. But I also kind of like the raunchiness of how we might mean toilet now. Like, it's not a word we associate with like 18th century Rococo, aesthetics. We it's a kind of like ugly quotidian word. I like that kind of, that juxtaposition right in the title. And he's getting this book, and the pages are uncut. It hasn't really been looked into. It's like this antique, and we don't really know the relationship, but they don't kiss, but maybe they want to.
Well, and you have the word uncut.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. There's a lot
of phallicism happening. Well, and that's where I actually see you as, a modern day Jean Genet, in a way, of bringing, like, especially Our Lady of the Flowers, and there's those BDSM, like almost really wanting pain, but you want the pleasure at the same time. And Jean Genet loved, like, I thought the Toilet of Venus was a really nice hearkening back to that reverberating of shame and pleasure existing side by side.
It might be a book title one day for me.
Really? Oh,
Toilet of Venus. We'll see one day.
And I don't know.
But
no, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh no, please.
Well, no, I was just gonna ask, do you write other genres, or are you comfortable seeing yourself as a poet? Like, do you see yourself writing a type of queer novel or short stories?
I've thought about it, of course. But I love poetry. I really love making poems. I mean, I find it so satisfying. Prose is very painful for me to write. I've not really written fiction, like traditional fiction. But I'm a critic. I have a PhD in English. I wrote a dissertation on James Merrill, and I've done these long kinds of prose critical works, and prose is very painful. I don't know, I feel really like an imposter. I feel really kind of nervous about it. I love writing poetry. There have been times I thought, oh, maybe I should try my hand at fiction or something, but I don't know. Not yet.
Mhm.
I mean, I write book reviews and things. I like writing criticism, but I can't see myself having the discipline or fortitude to write a novel. One of the things I love about reading poetry and writing poetry is that the feeling is so intense. Like all of the senses are awakened. You are not just thinking about narrative and interiority, but also where the lines end, where the kind of fragrance of words lingers and where it trails off. Like it's such a sensuous experience for me as a reader and a writer. And then the poem's done and you're released back into your life. Like I love being kind of intensely like held by the throat by a poem and then like kind of let go. And it's like, was that a dream? And writing poems feels that way for me too, Andrew. Like you're working like so hard on making this little teeny tiny document and then like you're done and you can like take a walk and have dinner and
Yeah.
leave that there. Like my friends who are really gifted fiction writers, they are working all the time. Just the size of a novel, the consistency you need to see it through is such an intense kind of work ethic that I don't naturally have. Like I love the intense spurts. I can teach a class and then like on the train home, like have an idea for a poem and like make something little happen. But the idea of like having to wake up every morning and like go to the Word doc and like confront the story over a period of many years, like that doesn't sound appealing to me. Poetry book is made of a bunch of little poems. I don't know any poet who just like writes page one and then like writes 50 poems in a row. Like you kind of work on them in bits and pieces, and then there's a whole separate process of like putting them into an order, which is a different kind of art form. And I love doing that. But the idea of like making something big, and I just don't have it in me at this moment. Maybe I'll mature one day, but I don't have it now, Andrew. I don't want
I
to
think
do
you're
it.
very mature, Richie.
I don't want to do it. I'm too, it sounds long and boring.
Yeah, well, you're into, I think something else that is very different. You're really awakening me to this is even. And now a message from the Gay and Lesbian Review.
Hello, listeners. This is Stephen Hemrick, the publisher of the GNLR, here with a special offer just for you. For those of you who aren't familiar with the GNLR, let me provide a little background. The GLR is a bi-monthly magazine of history, culture, and politics that publishes essays in a wide range of disciplines, as well as a slew of reviews of books, plays, and movies, and a number of special features such as artists' profiles and the popular art memo column. Each issue brings you consistently intelligent, lively, thought-provoking articles focused on a unifying theme and brings together the leading minds on the topic. You won't find a lot about the latest dating fads or fashion trends, though you might find articles about online dating as a social phenomenon or the gay influence on 20th century fashion. For example, the theme of the current issue is Queens and Kings, and it features an article by Andrew Holleran about Truman Capote's relationships with glamorous women, the women he called his swans. Now for the special offer. When you subscribe, you'll receive a free copy with any print or digital subscription. That's 7 issues instead of 6. Visit glreview.org. That's glreview.org. Click subscribe and enter promo code ITBR for your free issue. And as an added bonus, you'll receive online access to all archived issues of the magazine.
Like me feeling that that I have intimate knowledge of you reminds me of an autobiography. I brought this up with my students that poetry, autobiography, theater, they all share this similar understanding, which is like breaking the boundaries of audience or reader to the art and like that fourth wall disappearing, which, for you, I just feel so many of your readers, they must have this intimate knowledge they think they know about you, or like, oh yes, Richie gave us in the fables the understanding of homosexuality like coming from shame with his reading of Aesop, and but then thinking, okay, well, does Richie, like, where did he experience shame in his own coming out journey, or is he still feeling shame, right? Like it's almost like a psychological exercise to play.
Well, and I love poems that play with that. Louise Glick is one of my mentors and favorite writers, and she has a, it's not from a queer vantage per se, but there's a real psychology behind those poems, and part of their artistry is the way they reveal and conceal and make you feel intimate with a speaker, that of course you don't actually know. I guess maybe that is novelistic, maybe it is theatrical, but I love that in her work.
Yeah, and like in fiction and novels, usually, right, we have enough of a narration of not objectivity, but there's enough of a distance of the world being built that, I don't assume that I really, even though I know Gregory Maguire, I don't deeply know him through Wicked. Like, I don't think I know his nuances.
Yeah, that's right. I guess there's like the mask is maybe a little more detailed. But then I think of like a novel I love, like Remains of the Day by Ishiguro. And like I don't really know Ishiguro through it, but like you do know Mr. Stevens, that character. And like, because he is really such a strong first person voice. And like you, in a weird way, you know more than he does about himself, because you start to pick up on the ways that he's lying to himself, the ways that he refuses to admit his own feelings or his own ability to be a lover. You kind of see that in a way that he doesn't. And Ishiguro is just such a brilliant writer to me. And each novel has a totally different kind of character that you really get to like see and not see the world through.
Yeah. Well, so as we're wrapping up, this has been we've hit so many registers.
I know, it's great talking with you. I love it.
Well, so if we have just a few more minutes, I have just a few hard-hitting poetic questions to ask you, Richie, that you don't have to answer. But
I'll try my best. Hard-hitting that sounds intimidating.
No. I don't want it to be intimidating. It's more just like going through your poetry. First, are you creating your own fable in the fables, or is this an actual fable that you're alluding to from Aesop?
Oh, that's a good question.
My students ask this.
I mean, kind of both. I mean, I wanted the poem to be a kind of my own fable using a real fable, but that is a real fable in Aesop. I read it in college in a class, and I've never been able to forget that, because a lot of them are like about the frog and the crow.
Yes.
I mean, like they're the fables we know, but this one is about the creation of man, I guess you would say, and all of the different assignments of attributes to body parts, and shame goes up the rectum reluctantly. And the moral of the story in that Aesopian way is that, if Eros enters the body, shame will leave. That's a real fable. When it must have been 10 or 15 years that I'd been thinking about that fable before I wrote the poem. And when I published it, it was published in Poetry Magazine, who is very diligent, and they actually fact check poems. The New Yorker sometimes does this too. They actually went and had to find the actual fable that this came from, just to see if I was quoting from it. But I wasn't really like quoting text. I was just kind of like paraphrasing from memory. But they wanted to go see, like, if that was really in there, and it was a chance for me to kind of see that fable again. And yeah, it's a real one. And I wanted to kind of make my own fable, that was kind of a critique of the homophobia of that original work of art, but also that was kind of playful and a little self-implicating at the same time.
Yeah. Oh,
real fable. You can tell your students.
Yes, I will. They're going to be they're listening to this now, so this is really.
It's a very. Oh, they're here. They're here.
Yes, they're here in outside of this time. But
Wow.
Also, are you maybe referencing to Call Me by Your Name about the novel that you were not enjoying reading until a certain line? Do you remember? There's a certain moment in your
No, I mean, I
poem.
love Call Me by Your Name. I mean, that is one of the really important books to me, and I loved the movie too. Like when that first came out, like I would get all of these texts from people saying, "Oh my God, Richie, there's this like movie, and it's like about your life." I think a lot of people associate me with it for whatever reason because I love classical antiquity, and
Yes, yes.
a lot of my poems are about kind of like lounging around and like falling in love in Europe and being heartbroken. But no, it's a different novel. I felt really ungenerous writing it because the speaker's kind of mean about the novel. I was always like worried if the author would see it. The author's Nicolas Mathieu. It's called oh, it was it's translated as "and their children after them."
Oh.
That was my only pandemic poem, really. I was reading that novel. It won all of the big French prizes, and I was just very bored with life and bored with that book and with everything. I felt like really lonely in those early weeks of the pandemic. I just took baths all day, tried to read, but I couldn't get into anything. I'm kind of extroverted and was like, thought I was going to die after like 2 days of isolation. I was like lying on the floor. My husband was like, "What is wrong with you?" But I would take baths and read this. And I just remember like in a world with kind of no, where the narrative had felt like it had kind of stopped for me, like that beautiful detail that he writes about the boy puts like the Ray-Bans in his shoe or whatever while he swims, and that just like it awakened the whole world to me. I felt like even in this period of such loneliness, the whole world swam back in the form of that image, and I was like, oh my God, I have a body. Like there's a world out there. Like there's these objects that I can connect to, and that felt so intoxicating. So
Yeah.
so it's a real novel, but I don't mean to be a little mean about it because it's a journey in that
Well,
poem
it's
from
your
like
it's the speaker's
from
critical. No,
hating the
it's
book
yes,
to
yes.
realizing that the book has something very profound to say, even in its most minute detail.
Yeah, it's part of your art, and no,
Part of
it's
exactly
part
being
of
a
the
reader.
creation. And my last question, okay, hopefully this isn't too cheeky of me, but because I'm assuming you might get asked this a lot, but I'm going to try to do it in a different angle, which is you did mention your husband. I'm not going to have you reveal your behind the scenes with your husband, but I am curious, like, you know, because of 100 Lovers and this title, like, does your husband ever like talk deeply about your poems in it, or like want to know, what inspired some of these poems, or has the whole journey, I'm trying to get to,
Yeah, no,
is
I
it in the
get it.
past for your husband in a way, like
No,
being
I
in
mean,
intimate
he
moments?
knows me. He knows me better than anyone else.
Hmm.
I mean, we met when we were 18.
Oh.
We were really like childhood. He once said to me, we were old children when we met, and
Oh.
I love that. Like, I mean, that he's the real poet in our marriage in that way. But I mean, I don't think like anything is like a surprise to him. I mean, he knows me so well. He's such a presence in all of these poems. He's such a presence in my entire conception of a sexuality because we met so young.
Hmm.
Where like there's a way that I was never really an adult ever in my life without him, without his presence, without the absence of him, um, without him as a kind of looming and powerful figure in my life. So usually, he's not overly curious about the poems. Like usually he's, living alongside of me as I make them and as I live the life that produces them. And he's also there to read them and to make suggestions. I mean, because he knows me so well, he's my great reader. He
Hmm.
knows when I'm lying. He knows when
Oh.
I'm being cheap. He knows when I'm not pushing myself hard enough. Like he just knows all of those things about me. And he's not afraid to express like when something is just mildly working, or when something's really good and I've really made something that feels true to us both.
So, but he doesn't get tired of all the fan mail that you receive.
No,
as a poet.
I think he gets a kick. I think he gets a kick out of it at this point. You know, I do a lot of readings. There's a lot of lovely people I get to encounter, and you know, they have a lot in common.
They have a lot in common.
Yeah, they do. And I think he gets a kick out of it.
I feel like this whole episode has been a poem from you, Richie. There's a lot that,
thank you.
Well, you know, because you just have such a way of conveying language through conversation, and it makes sense that this is your art form. And I'm assuming your husband's not a poet.
No, he's not a poet.
Okay.
No, but I mean, he doesn't write poems, but I mean, I would be lying if I said he was not more involved in poetry than your average American. I mean, he's going to more poetry readings than most poets probably. Having the misfortune of being my husband. One of our early dates was I skipped school. I skipped school a lot. That's what French novel's about too, which is about my husband also meeting him. But one of our early dates was skipping school and going over to the Radcliffe Institute at Harvard and seeing the poet Adrienne Rich late in her life, just before she died, and in one of her very rare East Coast appearances in that day. I was like, oh my God, we have to go see Adrienne Rich. And he was like, who is that? What are we doing? How did I end up with you? But I mean, our whole marriage has been, you know, filled with poetry and poets. And in some ways that's a hard life. I mean, I think like my career is very frustrating. It's very unstable. My feelings are often hurt by just how much rejection and difficulty there is in being an artist in Trump's America. And, you know, it's just not easy. But I certainly have no regrets. I have a lot of other friends who are like, God, I wish I did something else. I've loved every minute of it, and I've met incredible people, and I feel like I've got to engage in a really deep way with English and with the world through poets and poetry. And I think that my husband feels that way too, as annoying as poets can be sometimes. Like we've met some awesome people and felt deeply and learned a lot.
Yeah. Well, you're going to have me return to diving into the wreck, which is one of my favorite.
Oh, I love teaching that poem.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I can't remember if she read it or not at that reading at Harvard. I don't remember any of the, you know, which poems she read. I just remember there were so many people there, and I remember feeling like, okay, this is going to be one of the great events that I get to have the fortune of seeing in my life.
Yeah. Well, this has been one of the great events of my
life. Oh,
Andrew. Well, actually, no, now I'm 30 as everyone's listening to this, but I'm almost 30. So this has been...
when's your birthday?
Oh, September 21st.
Oh, nice. So yes. It's coming up.
Yes, it's coming up. And
good.
You know, this has been wonderful to meet, you know, the new queer poet generation that you know, I'm very excited for poetry's future, and especially queer poetry, because it's, you know, so varied. And, you know, everyone out there, please get your hands on 100 Lovers. You know, and also Richie reads the audiobook. So I'm going to put the link to both the book and the audiobook. And, you know, thank you, Richie, for gracing me with the readings and the audience listening. You know, thank you for taking the compliment from me.
No, thank you so much, Andrew. Oh gosh. Well, you know, it's all part of living as an artist, and I'm just been so grateful. It's been super fun talking with you, and yes. We could do this forever.
We could, but you know, I'll return with you when you have your next workout. So
excellent. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Richie. Okay, and bye everyone out there. Thank you so much for listening to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. Welcome to the fall season. The Ivory Tower Boiler Room is a public humanities podcast where we interview writers, scholars, performers, and artists. Episodes air on Mondays. I am Andrew Rimby, the executive director. I'm so happy to welcome my team, Mary DePippi, our chief contributor, Kimberly Dallas, our editor, and an amazing fall group of interns. Thank you to this team. Please follow the Ivory Tower Boiler Room on TikTok and Instagram at Ivory Tower Boiler Room. Easy to remember. Our Twitter is at Ivory Boiler Room. And we have a whole new design for our Patreon. It is called the Ivory Tower Boiler Room Cafe because you're joining us and eavesdropping on our conversations that are unedited videos of all of our Ivory Tower Boiler Room episodes, as if you're eavesdropping in a cafe, overhearing the conversation. Well, talking about overhearing a conversation, hi, Mary.
Hello, Andrew, and hello, everyone. I'm Mary DePippi, the host of True Crime in Academia, a true crime podcast that is focused mainly on the crimes committed by and to those in the field of academia. Episodes air every Tuesday at noon. You can follow True Crime in Academia on Instagram and TikTok at True Crime in Academia and on Twitter at TC in Academia because Twitter hates extra characters, as we all know. And as Andrew alluded to earlier, we have a Patreon, and True Crime in Academia has exclusive bonus episodes for subscribers. As a true crime enthusiast, I don't necessarily like to pigeonhole my true crime interests. So over on the Patreon, I cover some of the more high profile cases not related to academia, such as the murder of JonBenet Ramsey and the case of Casey Anthony. So if you want access to videos like that, go over to patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room and become a subscriber.
Thank you all for joining us. And here's to an amazing fall season. Bye. Bye, everyone.